The first thing I noticed after I opened my eyes was that my hand was warm. That was wrong. The last thing I remembered was the cold of the marble floor against my cheek, and the taste of copper in my mouth, and Adrian standing over me with his hands in his pockets, watching me die. My wedding dress had been white that morning. By the time the paramedics arrived, it was the color of rust. But now my hand was warm, and there was sunlight on my face, and someone in the next room was laughing. I sat up slowly. My bedroom. The penthouse Adrian and I had shared since the wedding. The clock on the nightstand said it was 9 a.m. The date on my phone said it was April 14th, the morning of my wedding. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to breathe normally. The laugh came again from the kitchen. Madison's laugh. My sister, who had been my maid of honor. My sister, who, 6 months later, would shove me down a marble staircase at our family estate and watch me bleed out at her feet while Adrian stood 3 steps above her, doing nothing. I walked to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror and saw the face of a woman who was about to make the worst decision of her life. I was 27 years old. I was about to marry Adrian Whitlock at 4 o'clock that afternoon. I had $1 billion inheritance my father had not yet announced, and a sister who was already, that morning, sleeping with my fiancé. I knew everything now. Every betrayal, every lie. Every offshore account Adrian had opened with my sister's name on the second signature line. Every smile they had exchanged across me at family dinners while I poured the wine. I knew the moment Madison pushed me. I knew the precise angle at which my husband had turned away. I knew the things he had said to her in the kitchen the night before that he had thought no one heard. I had heard. I gripped the edge of the marble counter and waited for my hands to stop shaking. They stopped sooner than I expected. Something in me had already changed, and I understood, looking at the woman in the mirror, that I was not going to spend this second life weeping. I was going to spend it collecting. I went into the kitchen barefoot. Madison was at the island in one of my robes, eating a strawberry off the platter the caterer had sent over. "There she is," Madison said. "The bride. How are you feeling?" "Wonderful," I said. "I had the strangest dream." "Tell me." "I dreamed I died," I said, "on a marble floor, in a wedding dress." And Adrian watched. Madison laughed, but the laugh stuttered halfway through. She looked down at the strawberry in her hand as if she had forgotten what it was. "You should eat something," she said. "You're not making sense." "No," I said. "I'm making perfect sense. I just don't think you can hear me yet." I poured myself a glass of water and drank the whole thing while she watched. She tried to read my face and could not, and I saw the small crease appear between her eyebrows that always appeared when Madison was uncertain. I had spent 27 years being the older sister who soothed that crease away. I was not going to soothe it away anymore. "Where is Adrian?" I said. "At the hotel, getting ready. He didn't want to see you before the ceremony. Bad luck." "Of course," I said. "Bad luck." I went back to my bedroom and locked the door. My father, Charles Vance, had built Vance Holdings from a single warehouse on the harbor into a logistics empire worth $1.8 billion. He had not yet, on this April morning, signed the trust documents that would name me as the sole beneficiary of the company shares. He would sign them in 3 weeks. In my original life, 6 months after the wedding, my father had died of a stroke he had been hiding from us for a year. 3 months after that, I had died on the marble staircase. Adrian and Madison had already begun the legal maneuver that would have transferred my shares on my death into a holding company they jointly controlled. I had read the paperwork. I had found it in Adrian's desk drawer a week before I died. I had not understood what I was reading until it was too late. This time, I was going to read it first. I called the cleaning manager, Yelena, who had worked for our family since I was 19 and who loved me because I was the only person in the building who had ever asked her name. She brought me the master key without asking why I needed it. I unlocked Adrian's drawer. The portfolio was where I remembered. So were the documents. Account statements from Cyprus, from the Cayman Islands, from a private bank in Liechtenstein, transfer records totaling, by my quick calculation, around $240 million over 14 months. 2 of the accounts had a second signatory, Madison Vance. Her signature, in her round, looping handwriting, the same handwriting she had used to sign my college graduation card. I sat down in Adrian's leather chair and I did not cry. I had cried already. I had cried in a different life, on a marble floor, while my white dress turned red. I had used up a lifetime's worth of tears in the last 6 minutes of my first life. I was not going to spend any of this one on them. I photographed every page. I called Nathan Cole, the son of my father's longtime attorney, a corporate lawyer at a competing firm who had asked me out the summer before I met Adrian and whom I had turned down. He picked up on the second ring. "Eleanor, is everything all right?" "Nathan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to take it seriously." I told him I was calling off the wedding. I told him I needed an emergency power of attorney drawn up for my father, naming me as sole authorized signatory on all family trust documents. I told him I had photographic evidence that Adrian had been moving money through 3 jurisdictions for over a year, with my sister as a second signatory. "Eleanor," Nathan said, "how do you know this?" "I will tell you when you are sitting across from me," I said. "Are you free at 1 o'clock?" "I will clear my calendar." "Bring a notary," I said. "Bring 2. I drove to my father's house with the photographs in a sealed envelope. He was on the back terrace with the morning paper and a pot of tea, in the same wool cardigan he had worn every Saturday for 20 years. "Sweetheart, aren't you supposed to be getting married in 5 hours?" "Daddy," I said, "I need you to read something." He read the letter. He looked at the photographs. He read the letter again. When he looked up at me, his eyes had changed. "Eleanor, how long have you known?" "Long enough." "What do you want to do?" I told him, cancel the wedding, retain Nathan as my counsel, disinherit Madison from the trust, get a cardiologist to look at his heart, this week, no exceptions. He did not ask me how I knew. My father was a man who had built an empire by trusting his instincts, and he had decided, sometime in the last 60 seconds, that he respected me as he had respected very few people in his life. He stood up. He kissed me on the forehead. "Go upstairs. The rest of this morning belongs to me." By 12:15, the wedding was canceled. By 1 o'clock, Nathan and 2 notaries were drafting the power of attorney that would, by Monday morning, give me sole irrevocable control of the family trust. By 2 o'clock, Nathan had also drafted an addendum to my father's will, signed and witnessed, that explicitly disinherited Madison Vance from the family fortune by reason of documented financial misconduct against the family business. My father signed it without hesitation. At 4:15, Adrian was arrested in the parking garage of his hotel by 2 officers from the Financial Crimes Unit, on a warrant served by my father's attorneys. By 5 o'clock, Madison was sitting in my father's foyer with mascara running down her face, demanding to see him. I came down the stairs to meet her. "Eleanor," she said, "whatever they told you, it's not true. Adrian and there's an explanation." "There is," I said. "I just spent 4 hours documenting it." "I love you. You're my sister." "You shoved me down a flight of stairs," I said. "You watched me die." Madison stopped crying. I had not planned to say that. It came out of me before I could stop it, because for the first time since I had opened my eyes that morning, I was looking at her face, the actual face. And I was watching her perform innocence the way she had performed innocence in the hospital corridor in the original timeline, when she had told the police she had not seen what happened. She stared at me. She thought she had heard me wrong. "What did you say?" I said, "You watched me die. On a Friday night in October. On the marble staircase at the lake house. You said I had been drinking. You said I tripped. You wore a black dress to my funeral and held Adrian's hand at the reception, and within 6 months, you were wearing my engagement ring." Madison's mouth opened. No sound came out of it. "Of course you don't remember," I said. "You haven't done it yet." She backed away from me. The fragile voice was gone. The voice she used now was lower, harder, and a little bored. "What do you want?" she said. "Not the speech, the actual price." "There is no price. There is always a price. Adrian thought you were stupid. I knew you weren't. I told him you'd figure it out eventually. I just thought we'd have more time. So tell me what it costs to keep this between us." I stared at her. I had known, intellectually, that my sister was capable of this. But it was different to see it in person, in the foyer of our father's house, in the daylight. The sister I had grown up with had never existed. The girl who had cried on my shoulder when her cat died, the woman who had been my maid of honor, those had been performances. The thing in front of me now was the actual Madison. "There is no price, Madison," I said. "You shoved me down those stairs because you wanted my life. I am giving you the life you wanted. The one with no money, no family, no Adrian, no future. I hope it is everything you imagined." I called my father's chief of security. "Please escort Miss Vance to her car. She is leaving." She did not resist. 3 weeks later, Adrian was held without bail. Madison, after attempting to flee to Liechtenstein on a passport she had quietly renewed in February, was apprehended at the airport. The cardiologist found a partial blockage in my father's left anterior descending artery and scheduled a procedure that, 3 weeks later, would save his life. Then Madison flipped. She gave the prosecutor everything she had on Adrian, including a recording I had not known about. Madison, it turned out, had been recording Adrian for over a year, on an app on her phone, because Madison did not entirely trust him either. Madison handed it over in exchange for a reduced sentence. She got 6 years. Adrian's attorney listened to the recording in a conference room and told Adrian afterward that there was no plea agreement on earth that would help him now. 6 months later, the night before the Vance Holdings annual shareholder gala, I asked Nathan Cole to come to my apartment. He arrived at 7 with takeout from the Italian place on the corner. He set the bags down on the counter. He looked at me, the way he had been looking at me for 6 months, with patience and warmth and the small, controlled disappointment of a man who had decided long ago that he would never push for what he wanted. "Nathan," I said, 8 years ago you asked me to dinner. I said no. I remember. If I asked you now to dinner, what would you say?" Nathan looked at me for a long moment. He did not smile. He simply set the takeout down on the counter, very carefully, and said, "I would say yes, Eleanor. I would have said yes any time in the last 8 years. I will say yes any time in the next 40. I crossed the kitchen and I kissed him. I did not cry. I did not feel the things I had felt with Adrian, which I now understood had been a kind of careful performance, even on my own part. I felt steady. I felt like a woman who had finally been seen. The gala was at the Harborside Hotel. 300 guests, shareholders, board members, members of the press, and a generous selection of the city's social register. I had been formally elected to the board 4 months earlier. By the time of the gala, I was running the company. I wore navy blue, not white, never white again. Navy blue with my mother's pearls. Nathan was at my side as my guest, in a charcoal suit, with the easy quiet of a man who had nothing to prove to anyone in the room. At 9, my father made brief remarks, leaning slightly on a cane, beaming. He thanked the shareholders. He thanked his daughter, by name. The room applauded warmly. I stepped to the microphone. Thank you, Father. Before we move on, I would like to take a brief moment to address something many of you have been quietly wondering about, but have been too kind to ask. The room went still. As you may know, my former fiancé, Adrian Whitlock, is currently awaiting trial. My sister, Madison, has already been sentenced. I have been advised by counsel not to comment publicly on the ongoing proceedings, and I will respect that advice. But I have not yet, in any forum, addressed those of you who knew Adrian in his role as my partner. I paused. 300 faces watched me. Adrian was charming. He was attentive. He proposed with my late mother's ring. He understood, as competent predators do, that the way to gain access to a family is to be useful to the family. He cultivated my father. He cultivated my friends. He cultivated me. If any of you here tonight ever found yourselves thinking that he was a better fit for our family than I deserved, and I know some of you did because I heard you, and so did my father, I forgive you for that. I let the silence sit. What I want to share with you tonight is one recording. With my counsel's permission and the prosecutor's, I am authorized to play a 40-second segment of evidence entered in the trial of Adrian Whitlock. It was made by Madison Vance, 3 days before our scheduled wedding, without Adrian's knowledge. I will play it once. I nodded to the technician at the side of the stage. The room heard Adrian's voice. Not the warm, low voice he used at dinner parties. The other one. She's so easy. She believes everything I tell her. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. There was a laugh. Madison's laugh. She always was the dumb one, Madison said. After we're married, Adrian said, we'll have years to work on it. She won't see it coming. By the time her father dies, she'll have signed half the trust over to me without reading it. The other half I'll get when well, we'll figure out the other half later. You're terrible, Madison said fondly. I'm thorough, Adrian said. The recording ended. 300 people stood in absolute silence. Vivian Whitlock, Adrian's mother, had gone the color of old paper. Her hand was at her throat. 2 seats down, the wife of Adrian's longtime golfing friend was whispering something furious into her husband's ear. He, who had been a groomsman, who had given a toast at the engagement dinner praising Adrian as a man of character, was nodding slowly without looking at her. In the 3rd row, Eleanor Bristol, who had been one of my mother's closest friends and who had once told me I should consider myself lucky to have found a man who understood me, was crying. Not performatively. The tears were running down her face into the napkin she was pressing against her mouth, and she was not wiping them away. When she caught my eye, she shook her head once, very slowly, in a gesture that meant, I am sorry. I nodded at her. I did not return it. There would be time for that later. At the head table, the chairman of our largest institutional shareholder set down his glass of champagne and stood up. He turned slowly until he was facing the room. He raised his glass. "To the chief executive," he said. I inclined my head. "To the chief executive," several other voices said, raggedly at first, and then in a chorus that built and held. The room rose slowly, table by table, until almost every person in the ballroom was on their feet. Vivian Whitlock did not stand. She could not have. She was too frozen. I stepped back to the microphone. "I wanted you to hear it," I said, "because I wanted you to understand, finally and completely, what was done. Not to me. I am here. I am whole. I am running this company. I am, by every measure that matters, fine." But to my father, who trusted him. To my mother's memory, whose ring he wore on his hand the night he laughed about killing me to take what was hers. He used all of you. I think you deserve to know. I stepped down from the microphone. I walked, calmly, through the parting crowd back to the table where Nathan was waiting. He did not say anything when I sat down. He simply put his hand over mine and held it, while around us the room slowly remembered how to make sound. The story broke in the morning papers. By Monday, 3 of Adrian's law firms had withdrawn from his defense. By Wednesday, his country club had revoked his membership in absentia. 6 weeks later, his trial began. The recording was played in open court. The jury was out for 2 hours. He was convicted on every count and sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. He attempted, twice in the months that followed, to reach me through letters. Both letters were unopened. A year passed. The new apartment had become a home. I had filled it with light furniture and books and the green plants that Adrian had always said cluttered the rooms. The kitchen smelled like coffee in the morning and basil in the evening. Nathan kept his own apartment because he was not the kind of man who pushed for anything before it was offered. But he was at my place 6 nights out of 7, and there was a pair of his reading glasses on the nightstand, and his coffee cup, with a small chip on the rim, lived next to mine on the open shelf above the sink. I had been promoted to Chief Executive Officer of Vance Holdings. Annual revenue in my first full year had grown by 23%. My father, looking healthier than he had in a decade, had taken up watercolor painting. Badly, and with great pleasure. Madison was 3 years into her sentence. She wrote to me twice a year. I did not write back. Adrian, in the federal prison 3 states away, had aged badly. Nathan told me one evening that Adrian had taken to walking the perimeter every afternoon, alone, for an hour, with the slow shuffle of a man who had nowhere to be and no one waiting for him. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel sorry either. I felt, mostly, that I had been correct. I had spent 27 years being a woman who tolerated. I had spent 6 months being a woman who collected. I had spent the year after that being a woman who built. I would spend, I hoped, the next 40 being a woman who simply lived, with a man who saw me, in a city that respected me, in a body that had not, in this life, been broken on a marble floor by people who had never deserved to know my name. The woman in my mirror, on the last night of that year, was someone I recognized at last. She was awake, and she was loved, and she was finally, completely free. I turned out the light. I went to bed. I slept.